Welcome to today's webinar, Personal Experience in Media and Scientific Communications. This webinar is coming to you from the Stark County Educational Service Center's Science and Math on the Move program and was made possible through a grant from the Herbert W. Hoover Foundation. We thank them for their support. Today's presenter is going to be Dr. Jenna Jambeck and a few other folks. Dr. Jambeck is a Georgia Athletic Association Distinguished Professor in Environmental Engineering at the University of Georgia, a 2022 MacArthur Fellow, founder of the Circularity Informatics Lab in the New Materials Institute, and a 2018 through 2021 National Geographic Fellow. She has been conducting research on solid waste and plastic pollution for over 2 decades. Sorry to age you there, and is internationally recognized for her research on plastic waste in the ocean and for the Marine Debris Tracker app she co-created with fellow faculty member Kyle Johnson. She notes that being active in research helps bring current environmental engineering issues into the classroom for students. And we are really very happy to have her today with us. And I'm going to turn it over to Madison because she's got a little bit that she's going to say before we get started.
So, hey everyone, my name is Madison Werner, and I just wanted to start off this presentation by giving you a brief overview of some of the data that we collected along the Ohio River Basin, as well as some of the data that more specifically we collected in Stark County. So this was part of our part of a project for us to understand how materials are moving through cities and ending up in coastal areas and more specifically the ocean. So really connecting this idea of what's happening on land and what ends up in waterways. So we collected this data in early spring to early summer of 2022 between Earth Day and World Oceans Day, again, to kind of connect what's going on land to what's going on in the oceans and what ends up in the oceans. And we logged about 18,700 different litter items along the Ohio River Basin using Marine Debris Tracker, an example of which is shown here, which is an app that we use to log all of the litter that we see in the environment. And we found the following litter densities in Stark County. The dark green squares represent higher litter densities per square meter, while the light yellow square represents lower, and those different shades of blue kind of bring up the middle. One important thing to note is that out of the 4 cities that we looked at across the Ohio River Basin, Stark County actually had the most litter per square meter. Litter items in Stark County included cigarette butts and hard plastic fragments, which is pretty in line with a lot of other US cities that we see. Those are usually in the top 10, as well as food wrappers. But one interesting thing about Stark County specifically is that we found a lot of beverage bottles, paper and cardboard, and then aluminum and tin cans within the top litter items, even though those items can be recycled and curbside. So that's one takeaway from this data, is that for whatever reason, even though those items are recyclable locally, they're escaping the system and ending up in the environment. And then we have some extension activities here for this lesson, which we will send in a follow-up email. So you'll be seeing more of this later on. And then we have our amazing presenters today, Dr. Jenna Jambeck and our amazing grad students, Shelby Mendez and Rachel Johnson, and they're going to be talking a lot about scientific communication. So Jenna, I'll go ahead and pass it over to you.
Well, I wanted to acknowledge that I'm also presenting alongside today Rachel Johnson, who is a graduate student with my group, and Shelby Mendez, who is an undergraduate, about to be graduate student with my group. But this is a picture of my entire team. And some of these folks you've also heard of in other sessions, but we have a large team, and really working together on science makes it a lot more fun. And I'm also going to talk about sort of my journey through, media and science communication today, but I wanted to also refer you to my website at the University of Georgia, where you can find a lot of the things that I reference in terms of links to blogs, some of the talks and testimony I've given, and of course, some of our publications, and then links to some of the other materials that will be in the extension activities. So as I was reflecting on this talk today, and this might be because I'm turning 50 next week, I went sort of way far back, but I just wanted to share that I'm from the Midwest. I grew up in a very tiny town, less than 2,000 people in Minnesota. My life has turned out nothing like I sort of ever could imagine, but I was always a very curious person. Probably my favorite two things were books and cats as a kid. I would say I was a bit of an introvert, but this is me here looking at this book with my mom, and my older brother who's distracted as usual. And then I sort of reflected on some dreams I had. So I was inspired to be a scientist from a fictional book by Madeline L'Engle. But I knew that I also really wanted to be a mom, and I wasn't sure that I could do both of those things, but I endeavored to do both, and I think I'm doing okay. But I think my message here is that, to follow your dreams and to imagine what they could be, even if you are inspired by fiction. And so I really have integrated, I would say, a lot of my family, whether they like it or not, into my life. And that's one way that I think I've practiced sort of communicating and talking about my work, and making it a part of sort of everyday activities. The other big sort of turning point in this story is that, and I know you've heard about through other sessions, Marine Debris Tracker. And so this was an app that we developed and was actually launched the same year that my second son, who's here looking through the storm grate, was born. So 2011. And so when that app was launched, I found out that a woman in England, Emily Penn, was using this app, and was not only using it, but was in an Apple ad for apps we can't live without. And so Marine Debris Tracker was mentioned alongside all these other apps that were much more famous. And Emily and I connected. So this was just a very kind of universe moment that seemed to be meant to be. And she was leading this expedition called X Expedition across the ocean. And I was like, oh, that sounds cool. And she's like, well, we're full for this year, so apply, and then maybe another year you can go. And so I did. And, I'd never been on a sailboat or crossing the ocean, so I really didn't know what I was applying for. But I just knew that, they were using the app, and this sounded really cool. And so, but I got a call about 6 weeks before they were set to sail in November of 2014. And they said, well, actually, we've had some people drop out, and we're wondering if you would like to come. And I thought, oh gosh, my kids were 6 and 3. I would have to be gone, at least a month, and I really wasn't sure. So I called up my husband and I said, hey, kind of joking, like, there's a spot on the sailboat. And he's like, you got to do it. And so I said, really? Because you're going to be alone a lot with the kids. And he said, yep, I think you got to do it. And the reason I'm focusing kind of so much on this moment is because I did do it. Like, there was all these green lights. I thought, well, someone's going to say no. So he didn't say no. My dean didn't say no. My provost didn't say no. In fact, they said, we'll support you in this effort. And so I was like, wow, I think I'm really meant to do this. And so I did. And it was really hard. It was really challenging, but it gave me confidence to do just about anything else, because I was like, I don't think anything could be as hard as we all sailed the boat ourselves, did all the science ourselves. Everything was, it was just this 14 or 13 of us on the ocean for 19 days. And so as a part of that, I had to talk. There was a documentary, so there's a link in the extension materials, a documentary of our journey. They really wanted to tell people about what we were doing, because the mission was not only to study plastic pollution in the ocean, but to show people about underrepresented, especially women, in STEM disciplines, so science and engineering. And so they really wanted to get these messages out. So we were writing blog posts. I wrote blog posts before we left. Blog posts are an amazing way for someone who's sort of just getting into this space, or maybe a little bit more of an introvert. You're not ready to talk to the camera yet, which I was not, of sort of getting your messages out. I often write down my messages before I actually speak them, to really like choose my words carefully. And so even if you write something out and then have to speak to the camera, sort of those words that you've written and or read will be in your mind. So that sort of just almost literally pushed me out there. And then we got back, and Emily's very well known in Britain. So we were giving talks at the Royal Geographic Society. That's where the documentary premiered. And then at the time, I had submitted a paper for publication before we sailed. And I learned that that was accepted after we got back. And that launched then in February of 2015. And this was another major turning point. And this is where we get into media. So I had sort of been doing a lot of outreach with X Expedition. And now all of a sudden this paper was coming out, and I had to be on this panel at this AAAS meeting in California. I realized I put this kind of weird picture of myself in here because I learned a lot of lessons that day. Apparently, if a reporter takes a picture of you, they can pretty much just use it. I thought they just kind of wanted to see a picture of the plastic that I had brought with me, and no, they wanted a picture for their story. So there's this kind of odd picture of me. So I learned that really anytime they're taking a picture, it can be used. But before this paper came out, I talked to about 46 reporters at this AAAS launch. There was many of them in this audience. It was like a press conference. I had no idea sort of what I was getting into. But I learned that reporters are not as scary as I thought they were. They really want to write a good story. So especially reporters for outlets like the New York Times, the Washington Post, NPR, they really wrote amazing stories. And then I was on the CBS Evening News. So when they called me to go down for that, this was after I had done those 46 interviews. So I had, given this message a lot. And then I was able to talk to John Blackstone, and then they made a edited story then to show with Scott Pauley on the CBS Evening News that night. Very scary, but at the same time, again, I would say practicing and really honing your message was important. And so after that, the message was getting out, and people were asking me to talk about this paper. So basically, we estimated the plastic going into the ocean worldwide, which hadn't been done before. And so I felt a responsibility, honestly, to give that message how we intended, because without that, other people could share that messages in ways that it wasn't intended. So that led to, not too long after this, I was all of a sudden at this hotel in Washington, D.C., overlooking the White House with who's now the King of England, but was the Prince of Wales at the time, testifying to Congress, which I've done 3 times, and giving congressional briefings. And then the State Department called, and the State Department said, we really want this to communicate about this issue globally. Will you work with us in our outreach program, where we host you at embassies around the world, and you meet with people at science centers, aquariums, schools. I wanted to visit waste management facilities. These are some of the incredible people I've met working on this issue around the world. Government offices. So actually not really testifying, but briefing Congresses, legislatures around the world on this issue. And so that led to that in 2017. And that has continued until, well, my last mission there was in 2022. And then this led to some work with National Geographic. So you can imagine the outreach has just sort of increased as we're kind of going along here, because National Geographic, social media, huge following, lots of again, surreal things, being on the stage at National Geographic, giving talks, and then, being in the field on our expedition there, which was along the Ganges River in Bangladesh and India, and being able to, again, communicate out to everyone what we're doing. Of course, you can always do science and not communicate it, but to me, if you want to try to make change on an issue for the better, then you want to communicate out the science that's happening. So this is also then that river project led to a Mississippi River project, which was incredible, with the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative, which is 104 mayors. These are some of the mayors that participated in the project, the pilot projects, and a couple of the follow-on projects. And this was involving really a citizen science and community science approach to collecting data along the Mississippi River. And what was amazing is I got to combine my two favorite things, my work and my family. So we traveled in this camper for the entire length of the Mississippi River, helping to collect data and having launches at several pilot cities. So again, press conferences, media is there, talking to folks and doing interviews to communicate about what we're doing. I have some blog posts, and as I was putting this together, I was reflecting, because today, actually, I wrote a blog post that year, and this was my son's birthday, and that is exactly the day today. April 10th is his birthday again. So, and I basically just said, wherever you are, you have to practice or celebrate your milestones, however you can. So he had his birthday in the camper that year. So there's lots of ways. Social media, a lot of the, you can focus on publicizing and talking about blog posts or something else that's happened on social media. So that's a great outlet. And I know, I think Rachel and Shelby may touch upon that. Another way to get information out are books. And I had looked at writing a larger textbook, but this was just the right fit. This is a small handheld kind of primer on plastics, and textbooks are often several hundreds of dollars. This book is only $17, and it's written like Scientific American. So students pretty much of, middle school and up can really grasp this. And this was led by Amari Walker Franklin, and I got the honor of being her co-author for this book. And so this is another way to get messages out. And then AquaThread. So podcasts are really popular. This came from wanting to meet with people around the world that I had met on all of these travels, but then, thinking about an in-person conference, but that didn't seem practical anymore, especially after the pandemic. And so thinking about how we can talk with folks and get their messages out. So elevating others, providing a platform for everyone to get some of their messages. We have incredible guests. Catherine and Madison are both co-hosts on this. We have early career co-hosts, and this has been a great way to get other messages out. As I said, some of these things I can't imagine. So another way that about 96,000 people heard about this message, and I really am grateful for UGA in helping to spread the message of our research, was when they featured me along with a video that they played at Sanford Stadium. So our football stadium, and I know Ohio football is very big there too. So imagining, audiences that are gathering for other things, it's a great way to also, you can spread messages about science and things as well. So wrapping up quick, I just wanted to thank you all for listening. Thank everyone around the world who has talked to me and who is working on this issue here.
Hi, Shelby and I are going to be presenting on how to conduct background research and communicate in science. So a little bit about us. I last year graduated in May with my Bachelor's of Science in Environmental Engineering and a minor in Spanish from UGA. I am now currently working on my Master's in Civil and Environmental Engineering with Dr. Jambeck, and I've been a part of the group coming up on 2 years sometime this month. So that's me.
My name is Shelby Mendez. I'm currently working on my undergraduate degree in environmental engineering. I'm graduating in May, and I have been in the circularity informatics lab under Dr. Jambeck for the past 3 years. And just wanted to touch a little bit on this. The way I got into research with Dr. Jambeck was there wasn't like a posting, there wasn't really anything like advertising Dr. Jambeck. I kind of just went online and saw all of like the research opportunities at UGA, and I made like an email to her. I was like a freshman at this time. I emailed her and I was like, hey, I really like what you're doing. I'm passionate about it. Like, would you like be willing to take someone on? I know I'm young, I don't have a lot of experience, but would love to grow under you. And she was like, yes, definitely, and took me under her wing. So that's been a lot of fun, being able to do so much research under Dr. Jambeck. And then some internships I've just had over the summer is HHNT, which is just like a small consulting firm in Atlanta, and then also ExxonMobil.
Just a quick little introduction. I know we've discussed a lot of the research and the data that we've collected with presenting along the Ohio River and Dr. Jambeck's like journey of gaining a lot of notoriety in this field. But as you know, the circularity assessment protocol is a lot of what we do, and it just includes different hubs and spokes that allow us to get a indicator of what the city circularity looks like. So a lot of the examples that we're going to provide when we discuss science communication are going to tie into how we present the information that we gather.
To start off, we're going to start with background research. And the main steps for background research in the way that we kind of work through in our lab is first, we need to have what good search engines are. And then we find the keywords of the questions we're trying to figure out, making sure we have reliable sources. And then once we have that reliable source, you don't want to copy and paste exactly what it's saying. You kind of want to paraphrase it or summarize it and make sure you're citing all your sources. So where do you start? I know it can be really overwhelming when you're just trying to start off with your research. And so what I first do is I make sure I have a good search engine. Examples of that can be UGA databases or whatever your school or college has. So for example, at UGA, we have Galileo databases, and you can see in this image right here that if you click just engineering, there's like 5 different databases I can find. And these are really good because a lot of articles or databases are like, you have to pay for them. So when your school or your college pays for that, you're able to access a lot more. You can also just use Google Scholar or Web of Science, which Web of Science uses keywords, and you're able to find a lot of scientific journals and articles. The second is identifying keywords. So a quick example is a question that we asked ourselves during our background research is, how is waste collected? Is it door to door? Is it community dumpster? And what is the frequency of collection? So while I was reading that, my brain immediately was like, okay, keywords, waste collection in city name, trash pickup in city name, and then frequency. So I would search all of those different words to see if I find any articles or any sources that are able to answer that question for me. Next, you have to make sure what you find through those databases are a reliable source. So the first thing you can do is you can do something called the SMART check. So the first thing you look at is the source. What are they saying? Who is saying it? You want to make sure that this person is trustworthy and has a lot of like past articles that they published, so that they are saying something good and reliable. Motive, why are they saying what they want to, like, why are they saying what they're publishing? Is it like good, or are they just trying to communicate their science? Authority, who wrote the story? Again, is it someone that's reliable? Review, is there anything that included that jumps out as potentially untrue? Because you want to make sure that what you are communicating comes from a source that isn't lying to you or maybe putting something inaccurate. And then also making sure like there's another source that kind of backs it up, doing the 2-source test. So like, is this the only article that's saying the same thing, or is there other articles out there that are kind of saying, that are emphasizing the same point? And then another thing is there's just some sites that aren't like the most reliable, or you just don't really want to cite them originally. You can use them to jumpstart like additional research. So Wikipedia, while you don't want to cite Wikipedia, you can maybe go to the bottom and look at the different sites that they're using, and then you can kind of find and figure out which sites are good. Social media, again, you don't want to cite that, but you can maybe see where they're getting their information from. And then just straying away from biased news sources. So a lot of times when the news comes out, it can be a little bit biased. You want to use unbiased news sources. And then how do you include the source information once you found it and you know it's reliable? So first off, you want to make sure that you're paraphrasing or summarizing this information. So for example, I included a little snippet from a source, and you can see that this is pretty long and there's a lot of information in it, but I was able to read through it really quick, and I pulled out this like 2-sentence summary, and I said the BMA, Department of Environment, is in charge of collecting waste through door-to-door collection, and there are 1,894 trucks. So that is just a way of you being able to figure out like the important information from the source and able to make it more concise. And then you just also want to make sure citations, that you're keeping track of all the information and making sure you know where it's coming from, because someone might ask you, oh, where'd you find that piece of information? You want to be able to go back to the original source. So what I'll usually do is after the sentence, after my summary of relevant information, I'll put the link or I'll put just the citation. And you might be wondering, how do you do all of your citations? Well, it really depends up to your professor or your type of research that you're doing. You might want to do MLA, APA, Chicago. All of these are just as good as any other one. And you can use different websites. So you can use EasyBib, MyBib, or other websites that you just put in the link and it immediately spits out a citation. Or you can also use Zotero, which is a source citation software, and it downloads onto Google and you're able to keep track of everything. I've used that before, and it's been really nice to just like open up my Word document and just be able to put in my source immediately. And then moving on to communication in science, this is part 2 of our presentation. We just wanted to kind of go over like how you can present your findings, and some important points that we wanted to talk on are, the first is creating figures. So you want to make sure it's consistent and presentable and easy for people to understand. So important things are including titles, making sure you have a key if it's necessary, and consistent colors throughout your graphs. Also, if you are publishing to like a really big journal, you might want to be aware of like, are people colorblind, and staying away from certain colors that people can't see. But you could see in our 2 examples right here that they both have titles. They have all of the labels, they're labeled correctly, and we do have some keys underneath. And you can kind of see that we have a blue scheme going on, with blue in the bar chart and also in the pie chart. You can also create tables, and that you just have to ensure that it's organized and has very concise information. You don't want a table that's like 2 pages long. You want it to be pretty short and straight to the point. Make sure you have the units in the column heading. You can see here we go average weight of plastic packaging, and then in parentheses we go grams. And then you can also, whenever you're communicating your science, you can choose to put a figure, or you can choose to use a table, or if you want, depending on your audience, you can put both of them. It really just depends what your situation is, but it can portray the same information. And then finally, you just want to ensure that when you're putting those figures and tables, that you're citing them in your report or your blog or whatever you're doing. So what I usually do is I usually talk about what my figure or table says, and then after that, I cite it and then put the figure at the end. So if that didn't make sense, the example here goes, to understand current attitudes and perceptions of plastic waste, semi-structured interviews were conducted with 14 stakeholders. Among those interviewed, 5 were government officials, 6 were from private waste recycling companies, and 3 were from circular economy businesses. And then it goes parentheses, table 2. So then you go down to table 2, and you're able to see okay, I can see the breakdown of the different stakeholders, the number of interviews that were from each of these. So it's a very easy way of like, okay, this is what my table said, this is where it came from, and then you're able to see the full table, or if you use the figure. So those are two different ways that you can present your findings, and then also ensuring that you're continuing to cite your information. And then Rachel is going to continue with important things to consider.
So when you're presenting your information, there's a lot of things that you have to take into consideration to like present it properly. So the first is like knowing who your audience is. This can change the way that you communicate when, like, if you're presenting information to a classroom of kids, they may not be as well versed in a lot of the terms that you're discussing. So it's important to explain that information in a way that they understand, compared to a room full of researchers and experts in your field of study who are going to be a lot more familiar with what you're discussing. So it's just important to know how you have to communicate. You should always define your technical terms just to make sure that everyone knows and is on the same page as you go through your presentation or you go through your report. They are understanding it. When you use abbreviations, it's important to first make sure what that abbreviation is. So for example, circulatory assessment protocol, once you first mention it, you can say it all out, and then in parentheses say CAP, and then for the rest of your paper or presentation, you can simply use the abbreviation. In a paper, this can be just using a glossary at the beginning that people can reference while they're reading the paper. It's also important to have citations, as Shelby mentioned. When people are, reading something or you're citing something, it's important to know where you got this information from. So a citation at the end of your paper or at the end of your presentation is important, so that people can go back to that source where you got this information from and read it over as well to see if they could find even more information. An appendix is also important if you have extra information that you don't want to include in the body of your paper because it can make it very long. For example, if you have a table that is longer than a page, you can put that at the appendix, but make sure to just reference it in your paper. And then it's also important to just stay concise when discussing science. This isn't an English paper, so some things do not need to be over-explained. And also it's important to be aware of bias when you're writing, and so making sure that you don't show any bias to any data or anything, or if there is a bias, to make sure to reference it and just discuss it. So next, we're talking about different forms of science communication. Dr. Jambeck gave a lot of great examples, but these are just a few more. You've got reports, scientific journals. These are peer-reviewed research papers or articles that are then published. These you have to pay for them. So it is great when you have access to a database like we do here at the University of Georgia that allows us to access these journals at no extra cost of the students. You also have presentations like this one where we share information, and then you have workshops and stakeholder meetings, and then of course social media. So reports, their purpose is to present all of the important information in a very robust manner and detailed findings. So our CAP reports that we put together at the end of collecting all our data and analyzing it in cities can sometimes be 60 to 100 pages. And so these, they conclude all of the data from every single spoke that CAP covers. A lot of these reports are free and accessible online at the Circularity Informatics website that I've included the link to, but this is just a good way to get all of the information out there. But sometimes, not everyone wants to read a very lengthy paper, so that's where presentations can be very important, as they can summarize the key takeaway from reports in about 15 to 30 minutes. And so there's many ways that you can present presentations. You have PowerPoint, Google Slides, Canva, and Prezi. And so they're just different mediums that you can make presentations more interactive or more appealing to the public's eye. And so for structure of kind of what a presentation, especially for a CAP presentation, can look like. You have an introduction describing like what is CAP, what are the spokes of CAP, as like we showed at the beginning of this presentation, so that everyone understands like how the data and how the information is going to be presented. We introduced the team of our great research team, everyone that helped collect the information and analyze it. Then we also discussed the background of the city where the research was conducted. So that way, if there's anyone who isn't, aware of aware of the situation in the city, gains that information and again, stays on the same level of like understanding, and then also like why CAP was conducted. Why was the research team brought in? What was the purpose of the research? It's also important to explain the methodology of how the science was, like how the data was collected and how the data was analyzed, so that when you're explaining it, people can understand how like this can be significant. Then explaining the results from the CAP for each spoke, and then lastly, conclusion and room for discussion and questions. And it's important in the conclusion section to just never introduce new information. And so if there's something that you haven't explained in the introduction, background, methodology, or the results, the conclusion is not the time to mention that. And so you have to just summarize what you've discussed prior. And next, you also have workshops and stakeholder meetings. And so they can be pretty similar to presentations, except the purpose of this is to engage a lot more conversations with stakeholders and members of the public about the data and the results and like what the data means to them, but what can be done with the data when implementing projects. And so you can use a presentation, or you can use a poster or a handout. So there's an example of what a poster that was used in Hilo, Hawaii, when Madison and Catherine were presenting this data to members of the public in Hawaii. And so as you can see, it does cover information of what the CAP is, so that when you're reading on this data, you have an understanding of what it is, and then just showing the key takeaways of the data that was collected. And then lastly, we have social media. So just like all of these other methods of communication, it helps disseminate information, but it helps it disseminate it to a lot more of the public, because a lot of people have access to these social media platforms, but also allows for a lot more engagement of with the public and other scientists. So popular sites that you see a lot of information getting shared in is Instagram, TikTok, X, formerly Twitter, YouTube, Reddit, or Discord. And just to, again, you have to make sure to fact check the information that is being posted. And so if you see something, you have to make sure to just quickly do a little Google search to make sure that that information is correct, because it may not always be correct, and some people may not always reference the source where they're getting this information. So just not taking everything as gospel, and just making sure that that information is correct. And so this is one example of research that was conducted on Mount Fuji and Mount Amaya, and discussing how there was microplastics found in the clouds in the air. And so it's got a little catchy slogan to grab your attention. And then in the description portion, they explain a little bit more of the research. It's not going to be as detailed as a report or as a presentation or as a workshop, but it does just share that information in a way that people can retain and maybe don't have to read a very lengthy paper. And then this is just another example of infographics on Instagram that you may see to help share information. So a lot of nonprofits and other research groups will look at audit brands and also the most common types of plastic products. And so this was posted by Break Free from Plastic. It's a collection of different organizations working towards getting rid of plastic in our everyday life. And so this is just a quick way that they're presenting research, like results from research that they had conducted on like the type of plastics during their Plastic Global brand audit. And so it's very much a very quick way to say like, this is the top 10, these are the most common products. And again, I think it's pretty eye-catching, especially the chart of the food products. So yeah, that is our presentation. If there's any questions.
Well, first of all, thank you, Rachel and Shelby, and especially Dr. Jambeck for being with us today. Also, I want to thank Catherine and Madison for all the stuff they've done to help us get the 3 webinars all together. We're really pleased with them. We will have them banked, and we'll have a way people can reach all 3 of them, and that will be coming out soon. Also, really want to thank the Herbert W. Hoover Foundation for funding the project. It's been a great experience for me to work. This is the second time we've been able to work with Dr. Jambeck and her crew, and it was really a great experience. So we really do appreciate it. Happy birthday next week, Dr. Jambeck. And
Thank you.
you guys have a good day.